Call meeting to order and welcome you to this, the sixth meeting of the Public Petitions Committee in 2017. Can I remind members and others in the room to switch phones and other devices to silent. The first agenda item is a decision on taking item 4 in private. So the first agenda item is consider whether we take item 4 in consideration of the committee's work programme in private. Are we agreed? Okay, thank you. If we can then move on to agenda item 2, new petitions. And our first petition is petition 1639 on enterprise agency boards. And this is a petition by Maureen McMillan on enterprise agency boards. We're joined by Maureen this morning. Welcome. And can I also welcome Rhoda Grant, Edward Mountain, Douglas Ross and Liam MacArthur, all of whom have an interest in this petition. Welcome you all to the meeting. Can I invite Maureen to make a brief opening statement of up to 5 minutes, after which members will have an opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you very much, Convener. This is really a personal statement. I grew up in the West Highlands in the 1950s, and the situation in the whole of the Highlands at that time, the whole of the Highlands and Islands, was that young people were hemorrhaging away, and the traditional primary industries were exporting the produce south with little added value. Hydro schemes were coming to an end. The short tourist season was about to be hit by cheap holidays in Spain. People preferred to go to Benidorm rather than Oban. And there was massive emigration to the Central Belt and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, from everybody from hotel workers to university graduates. In fact, the Highlands were emptying. And then in 1965, Harold Wilson's government, convinced that one-off schemes for the Highlands were not getting to grips with the underlying problem, set up the Highlands and Islands Development Board. Now, if Willie Ross, the Secretary of State for Scotland, had stood up in Parliament and said, "We are setting up a development board for the Highlands and Islands which will have its priorities and strategy decided by an economic committee of a dozen or so bodies meeting in Edinburgh and probably chaired by me," we would have despaired. But he didn't say that. To great acclaim, he gave the board power to make its own strategic, operational and budget decisions in the Highlands, by the Highlands, for the Highlands. Power, he said, to act at its own hand. Now, this power is very precious to the Highlands and Islands, and that is why every single council leader in the Highlands and Islands opposed this proposal, as has Professor Jim Hunter, the very highly regarded former chair of High, and David Alston, the present chair of NHS Highland and former deputy leader of the Highland Council. And the people of Highlands and Islands feel that they are all stakeholders in High. They have a strong sense of ownership of it and feel that they are in a position to influence priorities. And that is why the Press and Journal campaign has been so well supported. I hope you'll read in full what Willie Ross said in the House of Commons that day. It still has resonance. Look for the phrase "on Scotland's conscience," as I'm sure you're familiar with that. But Willie Ross also tasked the new board specifically with growing and supporting communities. This is not just an add-on, it's integral. It means that High not only has to attract and encourage industry to the hubs like Lochaber and the Murray Firth, and I'm very pleased at the recent great news from Fort William, but it has to work in the face of the economic realities to sustain often hard-pressed communities in the Northern Isles, the Western Isles, the small isles in Skye, the Argyll Islands, Kintyre, Lorne, Morven, Ardnamurchan, Moydart, Knoydart, Wester Ross, North West Sutherland, Caithness, East Sutherland, and I could expand this list, but it gives an idea, I hope, of the diversity and vastness of the task. Now, communities were nurtured by giving them a sense of their own worth, by supporting community projects like village halls, community shops, cultural events, and I wonder if this kind of nurturing will survive in the new regime. The social remit, I fear, may be compromised. So, do you think overarching, hard-aligned economic committee in Edinburgh would have agreed to support the Fashion movement, or agreed to build Solmore, Ostig and Slate? Would we have had, in fact, the University of the Highlands and Islands with its unique structure? Would they be impressed that High not long ago stepped in when 3 teachers in Kinlochbervie School needed childcare provision to carry on working? A great example of High carrying out its social remit. Audit Scotland did not find any weakness in High. Our experts are as expert as any other experts. High have consistently outperformed expectations, so you have to ask, what is the problem the government are trying to resolve here? Since Michael and I decided to settle back in the north in the late 60s, We have seen a huge change in fortune, not just a massive increase in population, but an increase in confidence. It would be an injustice if that confidence were taken away by removing decision-making from us. High is very close to the communities it serves and is part of the fabric of the Highland way of life in a way that other NDPBs are not. We value the autonomy that High enjoys. Maybe it comes from centuries of other folks telling us what to do. And there is still work to be done. Not all areas have seen this increase in population or confidence. Indeed, some are still losing population. Many of the remote, rural and island communities are still very, very fragile and need a continuing strategy which will support their economic and social fabric. Special attention needs to be paid to Argyll, the Western Isles, the Orkney Islands, Caithness and Sutherland. Remote, rural and island cannot be hard aligned to the needs of towns and cities. Remote and rural communities are themselves diverse and every island is unique. I fear the new proposals will be too inflexible to let these communities flourish. Something else that may be lost is the encouragement of good ideas from the grassroots. I give you the example of North Coast 500. What Edinburgh-based committee would support the marketing of a tourist trail around single-track roads up there somewhere that they've never heard of? Yet it has been a huge success and could create up to 200 jobs in remote communities. There is a lot at stake here for High and for the Highlands and Islands. High has never fitted into a government department box, nor should it be made to do so. It will kill it. Any alignment should be with other Highlands and Islands bodies, for example, the local authorities, the health boards, the University of the Highlands and Islands and the third sector, for the good of the Highlands and Islands. This one Scotland size does not fit us. It will be a great shame and an insult if a power given to us by a Westminster government is taken away by a Scottish government. Well, I hope, Convener, I've given the committee some food for thought and that you will help get the best possible outcome for the Highlands and Islands, which, as far as I'm concerned, would be the retention of the status quo and indeed, as well as that, the restoration of the local enterprise committees. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can we just move to the questions now? My first question is really sort of recognising that there has been some scrutiny in the Parliament in this. It's been debated on in the Chamber, I think, on 2 occasions and voted down. The Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee is also committed to keep a watching brief. The Education and Skills Committee and the Economy, Jobs and Fair Work Committee have also been scrutinising the Enterprise Skills Review. Given all this attention that the issue is taken, what do you hope that your petition uniquely will achieve?
Well, I know that there has been scrutiny, but I'm not aware of any results of that scrutiny. I know that there have been committees looking at it, and I know that there has been a debate in the Chamber, which the government lost. I think I just want to keep pressure up on the government. There are so many people in the North that are objecting to this. I don't know of anybody that's supporting it. I've spoken to a lot of people. I've spoken to Jim Hunter, I've spoken to Margaret Davidson, leader of Highland Council, I've spoken to Sandy Cumming, who's a former chief executive, and have got a copy of this book on Scotland's conscience, which is just being published today. It's the reason that Jim Hunter can't be here to help me with my evidence, because he has to be at the book launch in Inverness today. But I would recommend this as a background reading for anybody who wants to get to grips with what High was and the fears about what it might become. So I'm hoping that, I know there's a ministerial statement this afternoon. I'm hoping that maybe the Minister will listen to what I'm saying here today. And although I haven't any great hopes, it might make him change his mind.
Okay, thanks very much. Maurice Corrie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must declare an interest. I'm a councillor with Argyll and Bute Council, and I understand fully about the island issues. The Scottish Government consulted on phase 1 of the Enterprise and Skills Review, and as we've already noted, the Scottish Parliament has had the opportunity to debate the review's phase 1 report. What is your view on the process the Scottish Government has followed in conducting phase 1 review, and whether people had adequate opportunity to voice their opinion on the proposals for phase 1?
Well, to be honest, I didn't realise that anything much was happening because, as Ian MacDonald says in his introduction to this book, the announcement was sort of slipped in the answer to a question. It says, while on his feet, Mr Swinney slipped in the news that there was to be a shake-up. And the government planned to bring together, the various bodies. And now, I like this. It says, it was Rhoda Grant, the Highlands and Islands List MSP, who has pursued the government relentlessly on this. So I thought I would just say that so that Rhoda would get a smile on her face. But nobody really realised it was happening. So there was no consultation beforehand. It was just an announcement. And then people began to realise that something awful was going to happen. And I really didn't pick it up until the P&J started, their campaign. And then I phoned Rhoda and said, what on earth is going on? And as far as I'm aware, there has been no consultation in the North. I mean, no committee has sent a rapporteur up round the Western Isles to see what people there think about it. And nobody has sent a rapporteur to Argyll to see what their views are. So I really don't think there's been much consultation that I'm aware of. There may have been consultation in private with, I don't know, the Great and the Good or something like that, but the Great and the Good certainly didn't include James Hunter or Brian Wilson or Michael Foxley or Maggie Cunningham, who are the authors of the essays in this book.
Thank you.
Brian Whittle.
Good morning. The Scottish Government's yet to come forward with phase 2 of the Enterprise and Skills Review, and although you've already said there's a ministerial statement this afternoon on this issue, do you have any evidence or concerns that the Scottish Government is not listening to the Scottish Parliament or wider concerns in formulating phase 2 of the review?
Well, I think we'll see whether that's the case or not when we hear the statement this afternoon, and I don't really have any great hopes for that. There was Lorne Crerer's sort of take on what might change, and that didn't go down terribly well either. I mean, I have copies of letters here from Highland Council and in fact, from the leaders of all the councils objecting to, first of all, to phase 1, and then from Margaret Davidson, the leader of Highland Council, objecting to Lorne Crerer's conclusions. Unfortunately, she had been hoping to get the other council leaders to sign up, but because the council have gone into purdah, she wasn't able to do that. But I would imagine that they would not be terribly happy either. So I really don't see that there's been much difference, much change over the piece. I hope that answers the question.
Can I ask a supplementary? In the debating chamber on the 28th of February, the Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Jobs and Fair Work said that a number of members of the Convention of the Highlands and Islands expressed support for continuation of the board, but they also said that the nature of the board had to change to take into account developing circumstances. He acknowledged that it's important to listen to views and that perhaps some of the fears being expressed might not come to fruition, and that the best chance of achieving that outcome will come through having a dialogue about what might happen in the final stages of phase 2 of the review. Do you have any views on that, and would you expect or hope to contribute to that dialogue?
Well, I would like to see what the proposals were. I mean, sometimes it's not worth contributing to a dialogue if he's totally set his face against letting High keep its autonomy. Then what dialogue is there to have? As regards the board, I would like to see changes in the board. I would like to see the board change back more to what it used to be, because it used to be Highlanders that were on the board, and now it seems to be more like civil servants, as far as I am told. I can't say that for sure for myself, not having met many members of the board. But there is a feeling among people that I speak to that the Highland board has changed, and that it is not as Highland as it used to be, and therefore not as committed to the Highlands and Islands as it used to be. And if there's to be any changes in the board, I would prefer to see it revert to being a proper Highlands and Islands board with Highland and Island people on it.
Thank you.
Okay. Rona Mackay.
Thank you. Good morning. The committee's been given a briefing that highlights High's responsibilities and funding, including its role in account managing of 50 communities. What's your understanding of how the existing role of High would or would not be taken by a Scotland-wide statutory board? Can you outline what the problems might be with that?
Well, these 50 communities, and of course they'd be quite small communities, and there are ones that I'm sure are even smaller that are not the Highs, not the count holders. But this is all part of the social fabric of the Highlands and Islands, and this is what seems to have been missed by the Minister when he wanted to set up his overarching board, because it is said, it is reported, I don't know, but it was reported, it was in the Press and Journal, so it must be true, that he didn't know that High had a social remit. Now, if that's the case, he's been badly advised, but the civil servants have always been a bit wary of High's social remit because it doesn't deliver the economic goods, it delivers cohesive communities. I think there would be a big difficulty in this new hard-aligned committee looking after these small communities and being account holders for them. There's a lot of good work going on in the Highlands and Islands that might be lost, or once this particular phase is over, might not be replicated again. I am extremely worried about the small communities if this goes through.
And I take it from that, you're not convinced that a Scotland-wide board would look at what has gone before and try to build on it, or replicate what good practice has been going on?
I would be very wary of that. They don't have any background in doing it. I do not see Scottish Enterprise doing that. I don't think they recognise that that's part of their role. And I would really, really worry that it would be some kind of also ran, that it wouldn't be seen as what I think is one of High's main reasons for existence.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, MacDonald.
Okay, thanks, thanks, Convener. I should say, hailing from the Western Isles originally.
I can hear it. Yeah.
I'm happy to state for the record that I have sympathy for this petition. And I've seen the benefits of the HIDB and High at first hand. That said, however, in his evidence, the Education and Skills Committee in December last year, Cabinet Secretary Keith Brown explained that the Scottish Government gathered evidence from account-managed companies and those currently being provided with services by High and Skills Development Scotland. Now, Mr Brown explained that the evidence led the Scottish Government to the view that there are elements of duplication and a lack of joint working, such as in relation to international activities. So I'd just be curious as to what your view is on that.
Well, I'm sure there would be evidence of duplication, and I'm sure that could be looked at. But I don't think it means that everything has to be taken under the one umbrella. These things can often be sorted out just by dialogue, and if there is one particular problem with duplication, I'm sure that could be sorted out by negotiation. I really don't think you need such draconian measures to sort it out.
Yeah, it's not an insurmountable problem.
I don't think it's an insurmountable problem at all. I know in the past there has been, a bit of pushing and shoving, for example, between High and Highland Council and so on about who does what. But these things can be sorted out by negotiation, by compromises, by sitting around the table and saying, well, you do this and I'll do that, and there's no sense in us both doing it. You don't need an overarching committee in Edinburgh to sort that out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I wonder if there's any of our visitor colleagues who want to ask a question. Rhoda first.
Well, really to support Maureen, and I'm really pleased that she's taken this petition forward, and I'm even pleased about her warm words about me. So better put that on the record. But I think there is real concerns in the Highlands and Islands about what is going to happen to High and what it was set up to do, and whether it can continue to do that. I think there probably are issues about coordination and working together, but surely that is for the Cabinet Secretary to start banging heads together and make sure. We should expect all government bodies to work together. I mean, they're being paid from the public purse and that is their job. So I would hope that that could happen without changing the whole format of High, because when High was set up, as Maureen said, it was in recognition of the particular issues in the Highlands and Islands, the geography, depopulation and the like. And some of those have been addressed. I mean, if you look at places like Inverness, the fastest growing city in Europe for a while, while other places were going in the opposite direction, that was down to High. But we have had creeping centralisation, as Maureen said, of the board, and some of the solutions as well, like account managing and the like, where they work for some things, but they don't work for very small companies and 1 or 2 people organisations. So high needs of freedom to work with in the urban sectors, but also the very rural sectors, while encouraging growth around the inner Murray Firth, which is seen booming. Some of our island communities are still depopulating, and we need to do make sure that High has the powers, the strength and the local responsibility to do something with that, because, you know, I'm maybe being a bit unfair to the convener, but you represent an area in Glasgow, but you've also got your roots in the islands. You can imagine, you know, in your own constituency where jobs are short, if the option was to create 2 or 3 jobs in Tiree or 100 in Glasgow, you know, it's almost a no-brainer where you would go. Well, maybe not for you. Shouldn't put you on the spot like that. But anyone making that decision will see value for money per job. They won't really see that those few jobs in Tiree would actually underpin the economy of the whole island and keep it going. So it's those kind of decisions that need to be made. So I really don't have a question for Maureen, but I just really do want to support her petition and hope that this committee will examine those issues really closely, because I think there's a lot being missed, and I think if the Cabinet Secretary was aware of what we could lose by this, I don't think we'd be going down this road at all.
Okay, thanks. Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Convener. And first of all, could I declare an interest as a Murray councillor, and clearly HIE has a big role to play in Murray as well. Could I first of all thank Maureen McMillan for taking this petition forward, and she's rightly highlighted the involvement of Labour MSPs. I think it's also fair to say that Scottish Conservatives led a debate in Parliament which ultimately led to the defeat of the government on this issue. Edward Mountain, Donald Cameron and myself all spoke in that, and you know, we all agree with what's being said in this petition today. Tavish Scott for the Liberal Democrats had a question at First Minister's question on this issue, and John Finney for the Greens also questioned the First Minister on plans to centralise HIE, and I think that just shows the strength of feeling across Parliament about these issues, and certainly from the representatives in the Highlands and Islands. And I was struck by what Maureen McMillan said, that HIE is in the Highlands, by the Highlands and for the Highlands, and that is something that I think we have to stress at every point. This is an organisation that is based at the heart of the area it is trying and has successfully improved over many years, but wants to continue to improve. I would also say, from a Murray point of view, we're often kind of caught in the middle. You know, we're not quite Highlands, we're not quite Grampian, but with HIE, we do see a significant role and a significant investment by Highlands and Islands Enterprise in the Murray area. With the Forest Enterprise Park, with the considerable work they have done and continue to do with the Murray Economic Partnership, an awful lot of the successes that have been achieved in Murray would not have been achieved, or certainly not to the extent at which they were achieved, without the investment and the support of Highlands and Islands Enterprise. You also mentioned the North Coast 500, and I've been struck since coming to Parliament the number of times that all politicians from all parties, including the governing party, who celebrate things like North Coast 500, the new jobs that were created recently at the Forest Enterprise Park, with HIE managing to bring in another outside agency to bring more jobs to Forest and to Murray. And we all celebrate that element, and then you have to question, well, if HIE are doing all this great work, it's being recognised locally in communities, it's being recognised by politicians across the political spectrum, why are we trying to change this? So I would say myself and my Scottish Conservative colleagues fully support this petition. We would hope that even at this late hour, Keith Brown is watching proceedings of the Petitions Committee and is considering his statement to Parliament this afternoon. We will be watching very carefully and asking very critically to ensure that the will of Parliament is observed this afternoon, to make sure that the strong belief that this organisation shouldn't be dragged down and merged in with other organisations does not go ahead. And finally, if I could ask a question then, rather than just making a statement, would Maureen McMillan be able to tell me any time after centralisation when someone says, well, do you know what, since the local decision making was taken away from the local area, dragged down to the central belt, actually the local decisions were better or more informed, or would she agree with me that never happens and therefore we shouldn't do it on this occasion?
I cannot think of a single example, I have to say.
Very much for that. Liam McArthur.
much, Convener. Can I join others in thanking Maureen? Welcome back to Parliament. I think Douglas Ross has very clearly set out the cross-party feeling on this. I think, frankly, and Jim Hunter would be one obvious example, but I think within the Chamber there is an amount of sympathy within the SNP group as well for a lot of the arguments that you've made, and I think on that basis, like Douglas, hope the Cabinet Secretary is watching proceedings this morning and even at this 11th hour is minded to take a different course. I think that I was particularly struck by the point you made in relation to this being a kind of solution searching for a problem to solve. I think Angus was right in terms of highlighting one of the arguments that have been posited around improving the collaboration around internationalisation. I think there's probably something in that for some of the companies, but I think one of the successes of HIE, and I think you alluded to it, was that it's able to provide very targeted support to businesses, to individuals who have absolutely no intention or aspiration to internationalise or necessarily even to branch out terribly widely across the Highlands and Islands region itself. And that it's those sorts of interventions that are made at the moment, that have been historically made since the setup of HIDB, which are potentially at risk when it's being scrutinised by a central board, which is matching numbers, and in a numbers game, Highlands and Islands is rarely, if ever, going to register on the radar in comparison to counterpart enterprises of growth or sectors of growth elsewhere in the country. Would that be a fair assessment?
That would be a fair assessment. I think community cohesion is terribly important, and you're not going to get that by a drive for exports, let's say. I mean, these tiny little communities in Harris or Lewis or in Orkney, they're not going to do that. Actually, all this business drive for exports, I have been, for the last 9 years, chair of the Murray Firth Partnership, the Coastal Forum, and we had a big project trying to get fishermen not to export the local seafood, but to make it available to local people to eat and to have lovely fish restaurants in a trail all around the Murray Firth. So one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. I mean, at the minute, all this stuff is going to Spain, but we would actually quite like to keep some of it at home and provide jobs at home in restaurants and fish vans and fishmongers and so on for local people, which, again, you could replicate that. At the minute it's in the Murray Firth, but you could replicate it anywhere in Scotland that has a fishing boat coming into a pier.
I mean, I wouldn't like to create the impression that we're a region that's inward looking. I mean, there are sectors that are truly international, or world class, and actually where HIE has recognised the significance of those and got alongside individuals and businesses early on. Within my own constituency, the support around the European Marine Energy Centre would be an example, but through to some of those in fashion and jewellery, which on a national scale don't look sort of particularly significant, but within the Orkney and the Highlands and Islands economy are absolute linchpins in terms of job creation, in terms of wealth creation, in terms of skills development, the sorts of things that HIE I think has been
Yes,
very
I think
visible.
craft industries are very important to small communities because they can export, if you like, not abroad, but they'll export out of their area and bring money into their area in that way. Things like smoked salmon places. Now, I get my smoked salmon at Christmas from somewhere in Uist, and I think, well, there's money going into the Uist economy, and that all these little enterprises are underpinned by HIE.
Okay. Is there something? I mean, the argument is that, in a sense, 50 years on since the birth of HIDB, there is a need to, in a sense, reinvent HIE to some extent. This has been the Scottish Government's proposal for enabling it to happen. What would you suggest is the answer to where HIE needs to go next in terms of addressing challenges and opportunities?
I would say HIE now needs to look at the rural areas, the remote rural areas and islands more specifically. I think round about the Murray Firth is doing pretty well. As somebody from East Sutherland said to me not all that long ago, it just looks after itself now. It doesn't need the input that it used to have. Well, that's maybe not quite true, but that's a perception from further north and further west. And I do think that there are places that are still struggling. I mean, 50 years seems a long time, but in fact, in the years and years and years of Highlands decline, it's not all that long a time to get things turned round. So as I think I said earlier, Argyll needs attention, the Western Isles needs attention, the Orkney Islands, not maybe so much the mainland, but the Orkney Islands need attention. And Caithness, which, whatever you think of nuclear power, had a big industry on the north coast there with very, very high-class jobs. They don't have it anymore. The decommissioning will finish. And although there is renewable energy jobs there, they're not in the same category as what was there before, so that needs to be looked at too. There's a lot still to do, and I think to start interfering with High and doing what is proposed, I think that would be counterproductive.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And I think, unless there are any further questions, can I just thank Maureen very much for the evidence she's given. We obviously now need to think about how we want to take this forward. I think what has already been said is there's a statement this afternoon, so I wouldn't suggest that we let go of the petition at this point so we know what the statement says. From my own point of view, I went to school in Glasgow where every island community, I think, in the West Coast was represented. We were the children of depopulation. Tiree, Islay, Lewis, Harris, Skye. Because our parents had to move to work. I'm glad to see that, well, it must be about 50 generations in Scottish terms, but my nephews are now able to contemplate staying on the island of Lewis and getting good quality work there because, in my view, quite a lot of what HIE's done. Also, Scottish Enterprise got rid of its social remit, which is a matter of great regret to somebody who represents a city that needs community attention as well as chasing the big companies. And the last thing I would say was at the end, the Education Committee, where we took evidence from the Cabinet Secretary, he did say there was the solution had come out of the consultation, but of course when we asked who had suggested it, it would appear that nobody had suggested it except perhaps the Minister himself, and then folks said, well, maybe yeah, maybe nay. And I think the problem has been stage one has produced the answer. Stage two is not about testing the answer, it's about implementing it, and it's a bit in the middle I think we're losing, which I think this petition and the petitioner has exposed, which is actually what is the driver behind it and what are the consequences of it. So I certainly would hope that we would either be doing something or perhaps referring it to the Rural Affairs Committee, but I think it would be useful to wait till after the statement.
Says that might be sensible to wait. Yeah.
In any case, I'm kind of inclined to want to hang on to this one in this committee. I'm not sure whether the Rural Economy Committee specifically looks after Highlands and Islands. It's a much broader remit. So I'm kind of my personal feeling is that I think we should hang on to this.
Angus?
Yeah, well, it all depends on the statement this afternoon and what the government's response is to Professor Crearer's comments. So, yeah, I mean, I'd been keen to refer it directly to Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee. However, clearly there's there's a strong argument to wait and see what the statement says.
I certainly agree with that, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, certainly my view is what we'd be looking from the statement is not something that gives a nod in the direction of, I think we're looking for a body that does what it's already doing. And I think actually what Maureen has said about how you might strengthen it has actually been very interesting as well, which is perhaps to revert more closely to what it was in its original time. But I think we were therefore be agreeing that we do think there's more for this committee to do once the statement has been made, but we certainly think the Parliament should be doing more on it, and I think at that point we can decide whether we want to let it go to the Rural Affairs Committee or to hold on to ourselves. But with that, can I thank you very much, Maureen, for your evidence. I think that was very useful. Can I thank our guests for coming along, and I'm going to suspend very briefly while we get ready for the next item.
Can I recommend this book on Scotland's conscience? I said to Ian that I would show it around the committee. It's being published today, well, it's being presented today, and it only costs a tenner.
I hope you're getting paid for the plug. Can call us back to order. Can we move on now to petition 1633, private criminal prosecution in Scotland? So the next petition on the agenda is petition 1633 by Bill Alexander on private criminal prosecution in Scotland. Members have a copy of the petition, which collected 37 signatures and 10 comments. Members will see that the petition is calling on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to change the law to give the people of Scotland the same legal rights as the rest of the UK by removing the requirement that the Lord Advocate must first give permission before a private criminal prosecution can be commenced in Scotland. Background information to the petition is set out in the SPICE briefing, which members have been provided with in the meeting's papers, and I wonder if members have any comments or suggestions for actions.
Much higher level of private prosecutions south of the border than there is up here, and that's, you know, an obvious one. Now the question then, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I suppose that's what we're considering here.
I would suggest we write to the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service, etc., Health and Safety Executive in Partnership and Health and Safety in Scotland, and seek their view on the application, as they're the ones at the sharp end.
Yeah. I think one of the things we need to understand is properly is why. I get the idea that you prosecute in the public interest, but I'm not sure if other people have had this experience. We had a number of experience of constituents who seek a fatal accident inquiry and don't get that because it's not regarded being the public interest. They can't get a criminal prosecution, they can't get health and safety to get involved, and they're left in a position where they feel as if there's nowhere to go. And I wonder if this compounds that feeling, because they have to seek you know, the permission of the Lord Advocate, who clearly doesn't grant these things lightly. I think they said in the papers there have only been 2 in the last...
Yes.
Working in one just now.
Really?
This is why I'm saying that can we look to what happened down south, and it's hugely higher number down south. And exactly that question is, where do we go? You know.
And there's been some high-profile examples of private prosecutions that have not ended to satisfaction of people who feel, you know, who've had a terrible experience. I'm not sure of the other issue that's in here, which I think the Smith Commission wrestled with, and we certainly wrestled with it in our own, in one party's Devolution Commission, was the fact that health and safety regime is determined across the United Kingdom, which I think, while we're part of the United Kingdom, is a good idea. But the Scotland Committee, we don't get a set. I don't know if it has the powers to actually address some of the health and safety breaches within Scotland. So I think that's an area that would. I just felt as there was a lot of questions that posed to me, but
I mean, I think what you're saying is absolutely right, but I think that's maybe a different area to what he's talking about. The petitioner appears to have written to the Health and Safety Executive and the Crown Office, etc. So I'm not sure what could be gained from writing to them again. I would maybe suggest we write to the government to seek their view on the petition and to ask for clarification on what action it's taken to improve health and safety outcomes in Scotland, to have it on record. But
I suppose
it's a huge ask. It's a huge issue.
Yeah, I think it's something we probably want to just get a better understanding of, and recognising, I think the committee would agree that there is an issue. So we're writing to the Scottish Government and asking, I suppose, what action it's taking to improve health and safety outcomes in Scotland, because I think there's a suggestion there's not much of a difference, but my recollection is that, for example, fatalities in the construction industry is higher in Scotland than it is in the rest of the United Kingdom. There could probably also have explanations for that, but that is something you would... Does that mean the health and safety regime needs to be stronger? But I think we write to the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service, the Health and Safety Executive, as Morris has suggested, the Partnership on Health and Safety in Scotland, seeking their views, because I think it's the kind of thing, even from the papers, you could see the logic of the argument about the public prosecution in the public interest, but it's dealing with that bit where people feel as if they're not getting justice. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, in that case, if we can move on to petition 1634, equality in council tax payment options. This is a new petition which collected 51 signatures and calls for clarification of council tax legislation so that people are able to choose to pay their council tax in 12 monthly instalments in all local authority areas in Scotland. Currently, 22 of the 32 local authorities in Scotland offer residents the option to pay their council tax bill by instalments over 12 months. Of the 10 local authorities who do not allow payments by instalments, only 5 councillors announced plans to introduce this following the petitioner's research. A number of councils have cited the lack of legislation in this area as a reason for not introducing payments by instalments, with the legal framework being unclear. And I wonder what members' views are on this petition.
Is a local authority matter, and they could it's up to them whether they spread it over 12 months or 10 months. So I'm, you know, I think we could write to Coslands and ask for their view, but I definitely think it's a local authority matter.
I agree with that. I think the local authorities, from my experience, is there are different pressures, and there may be valid reasons why they do 10 months and not. Not 12.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I would like to understand why. I mean, I think, well, I do agree that it's a local authority issue. I think they obviously work within a framework that the responsibility lands in this place. I'd certainly like to understand, because that's putting pressure, undue pressure on some, and then rather than others. But so I'd like to understand why, I think, before I went any further.
Angus?
Yeah, I would agree, Convener. I have to say that the petition doesn't seem to me to be a big ask, but clearly it is an issue primarily for local authorities, but clearly certainly keen to get some more information from COSLA and have their view on it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm intrigued. I mean, I think we owe debt to the petitioner who's also done their own research and established the difference, and the explanations, which are we're not able to do anything with this because it's determined at the centre. So at the very least we need to resolve that conundrum. But I'm also interested, I guess, in what are the motives behind the local authority preferring 10 months and 12. Is it about securing payment? Are they more likely to get the money in, which they can then are they able to manage their budgets better if they do it over 10 months rather than 12? I don't know whether that's the case. It also looks as if some local authorities introduce 12 months where people are under pressure, financial, where they've got into debt. In order to prevent debt, would it be more logical to say actually it makes sense to make payments over 12 months? I'm assuming these things that they must have thought about. But I certainly think that the petitioner raises some interesting questions, but I would be interested in both what the Scottish Government and COSLA say about it, and not simply, I mean, I get the sense that so far they've basically said, the Scottish Government said, well, that's the way it is, it's not for us, and local authorities have said, well, it's a matter for regulation. So we need some kind of proper clarification of where that is, and then trying to tease out, I guess, local authorities. What would be the downside, what is the downside of offering people 10-month payments? I presume it's only about securing their own budgets, which is a reasonable pressure, I guess. So are we agreeing then we write to Scottish Government and COSLA on the action called for in the petition? Agreed. Okay, is that agreed? Thank you very much. If we can move on to petition, excuse me, 1635 on the review of Section 11 of the Children's Scotland Act 1995. The next petition is petition 1635 by Emma MacDonald on the review of Section 11 of the Children's Scotland Act 1995. The petition did not collect signatures. Members have a copy of the petition, the SPICE briefing and a note by the clerk. Members will recall we had the opportunity to meet informally with the petitioner in order to assist our understanding of the background to the petition, and the note by the clerk summarises the issues covered in that meeting. And I think I'd be speaking for all members in saying that we were very grateful to the petitioner and those who attended with her in giving us such clarity around the issues that have created the need for this petition in the first place. These issues included the unregulated nature of child contact centres, the location and security of the centres, and the qualifications required or ongoing training delivered to volunteers, staff or other professions involved in the child contact process. Included within this last point are questions of who is responsible for the safety of both children and adults while they are on the premises. On the issue of the suitability of contact being required at all, The underpinning concern of the petition is that the voice of children is heard. For example, whether sheriffs ordering the contact are required to undertake professional development and how professionals such as teachers and doctors can have input. Another issue relates to funding and accountability. The briefing material we have indicates that parents can be required to pay for this service, which may raise concerns about who contact centres are accountable to. The Scottish Government has signalled its intention to bring forward a family justice modernisation strategy, which is intended to ensure that the child's voice is heard, but the timescale for delivery of the strategy is not clear. And I wonder if members have any thoughts on what action we might take on this petition.
I think this petition raises a number of very serious issues. I think we heard some of them when we spoke to the petitioner in private. And it relates to child welfare and to current practice. So I think we should seek the government's views on the action called for and to establish the progress of the family justice modernisation strategy. And then I'd be very much in favour of a roundtable evidence session with all stakeholders involved. And we have a number of suggestions here that we might include Relationships Scotland, Sheriff's Association, Children and Young People's Commissioner, Scottish Courts and Tribunals Service, experts and individuals, organisations trained specifically to represent and support children through the justice system, and professionals such as doctors, teachers or childminders. Virtually anybody that's involved in child welfare, I think, should be involved in this petition.
Okay.
Agreed, absolutely agreed. I think it's important.
I think a roundtable evidence session would be a really interesting way of tackling this, because I said what we got from the evidence was that very raw, examples of what of practice that's going on, and I would have at that stage I would have liked to have had the other stakeholders round the table listening to that to see, get their response. So I agree that would be a very positive way forward for this petition.
I mean, I was very struck by what Rona had said at that meeting as someone with experience of the hearing system, that you were not aware of these issues. And as somebody who would be very alive to it.
Because the comparison between the hearing system and what I was hearing was, night and day. And, so something has to be done clearly.
And there are some issues. I mean, to me, it's in terms of Scottish Government's own approach to domestic abuse, around coercive control, and over many years, I certainly have had experience of the way in which quite often the contact system is used as a means of continuing the abuse, and that's evidenced in the paper work we've got, which suggests that both the mother dropping off the children or the children themselves can feel quite frightened. Yeah. And certainly, I certainly think women's organisations too, but that idea that just trying to get people around who have got experience in this field, we could maybe come up with some solutions as well. And I think it would be particularly useful to meet with, to have Relationships Scotland there, who clearly run this service and will be doing so, I'm sure, for the best of reasons, but to be aware of the way in which that then is experienced. The other organisation I might suggest is Glasgow Women's Support Project in Glasgow, who has done a lot of work around that place where contact and the legal system and domestic abuse all meet. But we can maybe leave to the clerks to think about actually who would be useful there.
Women's Aid as well.
Yeah. Now the other person who was very in amongst that group of people that we heard from was a child support worker. It was very interesting. I'm not sure that's a role that exists right across Scotland. It would be useful to know to what extent other local authorities have those individuals there.
The child line might be they obviously gather a lot of evidence. I wonder whether they have anything written about this as well.
Well, perhaps hide it even with the round table. I don't want to be appropriate just to flag up that we're interested in this issue, and any organisations that have a view may want to, they might not be able to attend the round table. Well, realistically, we have a limit on who would be able to come. But if there are other people who want to provide either evidence or information of their own direct experience, that might be something we should alert people to. Okay.
I think, Chair, as I say, on item paragraph 3 of the backup evidence from Emma says it very clearly. Currently, there's no system of regulation or inspection of the which I think is absolutely appalling. And yet, so sheriffs are making decisions on something they don't know
I
about.
think given that rightly we take child protection very seriously, this is this is something that appears to be have fallen through the loophole and needs to be addressed as quickly as possible.
And clearly these centres have been created to solve a problem about confidence, about contact and secure contact. So it's the motivation is the right one, but then it's about what actually the lived experience is something we do need to attend to.
I think subsequent to that, you know, I kind of found out that some councils work this very, very well, and the system that they do is excellent, but it's not regulated in any way. It's down to the individual councils themselves how they deal with that.
Okay, I think there's loads there to be getting on with, but again, to express our appreciation to the petitioner and her, those who were with her in terms of highlighting what was a very challenging issue. If we can move on then to petition 1636, which requires that all single-use drinks cups are 100% biodegradable. So the final new petition for our consideration this morning is petition 1636 by Michael Trail to require that all single-use drink cups are 100% biodegradable. Members have a copy of the petition, which collected 51 signatures and 5 comments. The clerk's note identifies one of the constraints to making disposable cups recyclable is the mixture of materials used to make the cups. The note refers to current European standards which define what characteristics a material must have to be compostable and highlights some recent initiatives that have been developed to address this issue. And I wonder if members have any views on what action to take on this petition.
Convener.
Yep.
Well, as a member of the Environment Committee, I'd certainly like to thank the petitioner for flagging this up. I'm sure most of us are surprised that many of the single-use drinks cups aren't 100% recyclable. In fact, I think that even includes the ones that we use in this Parliament, and that's why they're encouraging us as members to bring our own cups along to cut down on the amount of single-use containers that are being disposed of. So I'd certainly be keen to hear the views of the Scottish Government on this, and also COSLA, and also to seek the views of organisations or companies such as Vegware, the Environmental Paper Network and Hubbub, that are developing initiatives to address issues such as this one. There's also an argument to contact the Association of Organics Recycling, but I'd also like to hear from Zero Waste Scotland, because I know for a fact that it's on their radar, so it's good. It would be good to know what action they're taking to address the issue, and also from Keep Scotland Beautiful, who are also aware of the issue. So quite a list there, but it would be good to hear the views of all these organisations.
Yep. Can I just add on to Angus's comments? I think we should also see the impact on the fast food chain companies, seek their views. There's a practice that we've done an all-round review, and also the Food and Drink Association.
So it would be as if there's an organisation that represents these rather than exactly. Writing to them all. I think that. I mean, I suppose I was quite surprised. Well, the scale of use of these cups has obviously just exploded. And I agree with Angus. I just assumed that they were recyclable because they were cardboard rather than cups. Yeah. I'm looking at the thing upside down and around the wrong way. So I think it's been a very useful information providing from this petition, and I think Angus suggests a good way forward in terms of the organisations we might contact.
One of the technical problems, Chair, just I know from knowledge from drinks industry, is that these cups are coated with a plastic, and that's the problem. It's not the main material, so it's really that coating that's the problem. Otherwise, they just disintegrate in your hand. That's the problem.
Okay, so I think there's lots there that we can pursue, and again, we want to thank the petitioner for highlighting that issue. If we can move on then to agenda item 3, which is continued petitions. And the first one is petition 1319 on improving youth football in Scotland. Members will recall that we last considered this petition by Willie Smith and Scott Robertson at our meeting on 9th February. At the end of that meeting, we agreed to reflect on the recent evidence we heard on the petition at a future meeting, which we will do today. As members are aware, I, along with the Deputy Convener, met the SFA and SPFL informally on 20th March, and it may be helpful to provide feedback in that meeting before members discuss what further action we may wish to take. I think a note was also circulated to you. I think it would be fair to say we did appreciate the time that was given to us by Neil Doncaster and from the SPFL and Andrew McKinley from the SFA, and there was a number of issues that we discussed. We discussed the question of player registration and the whole question of the way in which this has been highlighted by the Commissioner for Children and Young People. We did look at the issue of minimum wage issues, but I think probably the view of the SPFL in particular was that this was a matter for the tax authorities, and it wasn't their job to deal with that while giving it information and advice on people's responsibilities. And we did raise the question that, you know, while there have been very few formal complaints, I think Angus's view and my view was in a culture where you don't want to be seen to be a difficult person or a troublemaker, there's maybe an encouragement not to complain about these questions. And I think this is all overlaid, in my view, with Scottish attitudes to football and the way in which football in particular is seen as, you know, if you're good at it, what an opportunity it is for you to make a fantastic career out of it. And there was a question of how you'd calculate the hours worked by a player and so on. I think we were interested in looking at what role the SFA and the SPFL could have in that regard. They also provided us with an update on Project Brave initiative, which is based on a performance strategy to develop the best players. And one of the aspects of the initiative was a reduction in the number of players within the Club Academy Scotland system. And it was a sense that possibly there was lots and lots of young people being caught up in the academy system without any great likelihood of them really achieving at the highest level. We also discussed you know, what the Commissioner's view that external regulation was necessary and the potential implications of that in relation to FIFA as world football's governing body. But this is an issue I don't think that either Angus or I had appreciated, which was, and we've asked for more information on this, that if we do move as a country to regulate football, FIFA will be concerned about that, because they're great believers in self-regulation, as we're all too aware from their own past. But that there would actually maybe consequences for Scotland in that. So that's something we've asked for more information from them on. We also discussed the question of child protection, and we know that they have given evidence to the Health Committee on that matter, and that's been pursued. But also who is covered by the PVG legislation when it comes to youth football, and the review that's been undertaken in light of allegations of historic sexual abuse. They gave us an update on that, and I think they also spoke about this whole question of intermediaries and agents, which I think is a whole area that probably, again, the Health Committee is looking at in some bit, but something that I think this committee is very alive to, that there is not any regulation of adults who, you know, can have a lot of influence and a lot of control over young people's destiny in terms of football. And I think some of the evidence we got was suggestion that they wouldn't necessarily be acting in the interest of the young person. And again, I think I'm right in remembering that the Commissioner felt that you actually ought not to have an agent acting for you if you're under 16. I don't know, Angus, if there are other issues that you wanted to flag up from the meeting.
Not really. You've covered it well, Convener. Just the only salient point that was flagged up was the issue of government interference. And they used the examples of Mali and Greece, who have been suspended from competing internationally because of interference from government. But having looked at the reasons for that privately, that there don't seem to be any anything relating to the issues that we're looking at here in Scotland. I mean, fundamentally, a number of the issues here in Scotland are human rights issues. So neither the situation in Greece or the situation in Mali are similar in any way. But that was the only point that...
That's very useful. Yeah. Okay. I wonder if therefore there are some suggestions on what we might want to do next with it, and it was also worth noting that committees already agreed to seek time for a debate on this petition in the Chamber, which I think has been agreed by the Conveners Committee. I should know since I'm on it. Yeah, I think we did agree to that, but we haven't got a timing for it yet. So, but that's something that's in the system. So, I don't know what other views there are.
Well,
Brian.
you know, as you're aware, Convener, I have quite strong views on this. I think first and last, the consideration is around child welfare, and I think that there's so many, in my view, there are so many missed opportunities, if that's the way to put it, that seem to be being brushed over in terms of looking after the child. And I think, for me, in the having twice taken evidence in this, it just highlights to me that child welfare is not the first consideration when from the SFA or the SPFL and how they're conducting themselves. Having listened to what you had to say there, you know, saying that FIFA might not like it, excellent. Given their track record, I do think that because other countries perhaps are not looking after this in the way that they should, there's no reason why we as a country shouldn't step up. And I'm almost inclined to. I've listened to Gordon Strachan talk about this quite a few times in terms of the academy structure and what's happening and in the best interest of the child. And sorry, Gordon, if I'm landing you right in it here, but you know,
got nothing else to worry on just now.
You know, I just find the whole thing incredible that we're actually having to debate this at all or discuss this, and having taken evidence from SFA and SPFL before and subsequent evidence, to me it seems obvious that can I put it this way, they've been skirting around the issue rather than actually answering the questions that we asked, and I would really like the opportunity to speak with them again.
Okay.
I agree with Brian. I think what you've told us about your meeting in private has been really, really interesting, and I'm wondering if we could ask them back, would they be able to elaborate on what they told you? Would they say it in public so that we could ask them some questions just to progress it a bit? So yes, I'd like to invite them back for evidence.
I think it'd be useful to invite them back, and you know, as I said at the beginning, we were very grateful to them. It was a substantial meeting. It was, you know, we met for well over an hour and we discussed an awful lot of issues, and it was certainly never intended as a substitute for the Petitions Committee's own role, and we were quite clear about that. I also think that there was some evidence I read in a briefing around what the footballers, the Professional Footballers Association is saying around this question. It would be interesting to know what they think about, you know, now about the petition, so I'll maybe get a bit of an update from them, but also particularly around this question of the implications of external regulation, because I'm quite surprised that we hadn't heard before, you know, given how much the Commissioner had said on it, that somebody hadn't flagged up very quickly. Actually, you could get booted out of these competitions.
We need to tease out if they come back, yeah.
The other thing I think they did suggest is, but it would be worthwhile maybe thinking about, is whether you want to get the opportunity to visit the academies and get a sense from, if they were willing and able to do it privately with young people who are involved in the system, I think. Because I think there's quite a lot of positive things going on there. I think it's quite a lot of, my sense was from our meeting, they were reflecting on how effective they had been and how they could make them better. So just confirming that we would be seeking another opportunity to discuss with them. I think we maybe want to look to, you know, for further comments again, as I said, from the petitioners obviously, and from the Scottish Professional Footballers Association. Morris?
Can we just add one thing? I mean, I'm going to sort of, it might be sensible to ask whether writing to the clubs themselves would provide further information, because they might feel compelled that because the SFA and SPLF, we've seen them, but the actual deliverers of it, I think it'd be maybe sensible to write to them and ask them for their views.
I'm not sure that they just refer us
Do you think so?
to, I think they would, I think. I don't think they would
It'd be interesting to do it.
speak unilaterally.
I mean, we actually did put it out. I mean, if we
There's
might get
nothing
half
to
a dozen
stop,
back.
there isn't anything to stop any of them responding right now if they felt that they
Because
wanted
they know
to
the issues going
deal
on.
with that, but
yeah.
maybe at this stage, if we're kind of looking to the organisations that represent them, certainly, you know, it was the case that the SPFL and Neil Doncaster was quite clear about what their role was in relation to the clubs and what the actual registration meant and so on, which was possibly more limited than we had imagined it to be.
Quite interested to think what it is. They feel this petitions committee will instigate them getting kicked out of FIFA. Oh, I'm really interested to think what it is they think they're doing. That you're highlighting.
I thought it was interesting, and you know, they did say that FIFA is very exercised by self-regulation, and I just think it'd be worthwhile. They did say they would give us the evidence, and I think that would be worth exploring that further. So I think we're agreeing that we would want a further, there are so many issues here. We've got the debate and a further evidence-taking session, which would certainly include the SFA and the Scottish Professional Football League, but we may want to look to see if there's anyone else that could bolster that evidence-taking session. Is that agreed? Okay. If we can then move on to petition 1458, and the Register of Interest for the members of Scotland's judiciary. This petition by Peter Cherby calls for the introduction of a register of interest for members of Scotland's judiciary. When we last considered the petition, we agreed to seek further information from the Lord President and the Judicial Complaints Reviewer. Responses have been received from both, and we also have submissions from the petitioner and a member of the public, Melanie Collins. Members will recall that in writing to the Lord President, we repeated our invitation for him to provide oral evidence, which is now indicated that he'd be willing to do, and I think to express our gratitude for that. I wonder if members have any comments on further action to take on the petition.
The President's agreed to give oral evidence.
Yeah.
Well, that just seems.
Just very. Angus?
Yes, thanks, Convener. Well, you know, having followed this petition from day one, I think it was lodged in December 2012, and having deliberated on it for what's now over 4 years, it's encouraging and refreshing to note that the Lord President has offered to provide oral evidence to the committee, given the difficulties that we had with the previous Lord President giving evidence to this committee. So, as I say, that is extremely refreshing, and I think we should take Lord Carloway up on his offer.
Okay, I think we should also note that Alec Neil has expressed an interest in speaking to this petition, but is unable to be here today. So it may be that at that meeting, when the Lord President is there, he'll be able to attend that meeting. But I think Angus is right that this is a step forward. So are we agreeing to invite the Lord President to provide oral evidence at a future meeting?
Yes.
And then we can see what comes out of that. Okay, thank you very much. If we can move on to petition 1545 on residential care provision for the severely learning disabled. The next item on the agenda is petition 1545 by Anne Maxwell on behalf of the Muir Maxwell Trust on residential care provision for the severely learning disabled. Members will recall that we last considered this petition at our meeting on the 29th September 2016. At that meeting, we agreed to defer further consideration of the petition until March 2017. Members will see from the clerk's note that the Scottish Government has developed a project plan around issues identified in this petition, and the first project that will undertake a quantitative analysis was due to be completed by the end of February this year. The project plan in its entirety was estimated to take 2 years, and I wonder if members have any comments or suggestions for action.
Convener, I'd actually, within my own region, had gone down to visit, it's Hansel down in Symington, and they have residential care there for people with severe learning disabilities, and have done for, you know, for as long as I can remember. I was just telling them I remember them when they used to mow the roof. We used to have a grass roof. I've got pictures of them mowing it. And so I had a tour there of what they're doing, and it, as you might imagine, as many are, it's a fantastic facility. And again, as to the petitioner's comments, their concern, of course, is around continuing funding. I'm sure we thank Petitioner for bringing this, but I would really be interested to see where the government are currently with their project plan on this, and I wonder if we could write to them to find out where we are in that process.
Okay. So we would be writing to Scottish Government, really getting an update. I mean, certainly from the briefing, it looks as if they'd been doing quite a lot, which is to be welcomed, both quantitative and qualitative work. But I think it's probably also worthwhile writing or seeking an update from the petitioner on the progress of the plan, because they seem to have been quite engaged with the petitioner, and that is obviously to be welcomed. Is that agreed?
Agreed, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that then. The next petition is petition 1551 on mandatory reporting of child abuse. The next petition is petition 1551 by Scott Patterson on mandatory reporting of child abuse. After a previous consideration of this petition, we wrote to the Scottish Government seeking an update on its engagement with the UK Government and to ask what steps it would take in the absence of any meaningful response or action from the UK Government. At the time of its response in February, the Scottish Government advised that there was still no clarity about when the UK Government might publish its findings from its consultation, other than to say it is expected to be in the first part of this year. The Scottish Government said it would give careful consideration to the findings when published, but did not give much in the way of what steps it might take in the absence of movement on this issue at a UK level. And I wonder what members' thoughts are for action on this petition.
I can imagine there's a lot of sympathy for this petition. I'm kind of concerned that we currently have no real step forward either from UK Government or from the Scottish Government. I'm not sure what we do about that. We're just making a statement here that I think this is a petition that should move. Yeah.
My recollection from earlier discussions is there is an argument to be had in either direction about the consequences of mandatory reporting. I think certainly some people involved with child protection thought there might be consequences. What I don't understand, in my own view, is if the UK is not progressing, why the Scottish Government just can't take this on themselves, since child protection is within the remit and responsibility of the Scottish Government. I'm not sure why they're hooking their action to UK action. I mean, obviously must be concerned at a UK level they're not acting on it, but I would think that we could maybe really just contact the Scottish Government and say, you know, why the delay. There's a whole series of things here that we'd be interested in their response.
There's a question, if there's a UK, if I'm waiting for the UK Government to go through, do the Scottish Government not have input into that at all, just from my personal, place of ignorance on this?
Yeah.
There's no input from the Scottish Government into a UK-wide?
I suppose I've not really kind of got in my head clearly why. Why are they waiting for the UK-wide report?
I think we should write and seek clarification of that, and also to get. I mean, they do say they were expecting it to be published in the first part of 2017, so we're well into that. So,
I think it's a fairly non-contentious issue across party. I think.
I thought so. But I think we need to find out where we are with it, and then seek clarity in why we can't strike out.
I'm thinking or advised that possibly the reason for waiting for the UK report is that you would want something with, you wouldn't want differentiated regimes in different parts of the United Kingdom, although there are other issues which would by definition be differentiated, but in terms of people can move, they can travel, and then there should be consequences wherever they are. And certainly some of the issues around the English inquiry into historic abuse are dealing with somebody who's a survivor of abuse but who was abused in Scotland. There's also there are quite complicated issues there. But I think on the specific issue of mandatory reporting, it must be possible for the Scottish Government to be developing a view, I would have thought, but just really to get their clarification.
I think we need to.
And do they have a time scale? Is there a point beyond which they'll say, right, we can't wait any longer?
Yeah.
I think we do.
Yeah. Was that agreed then?
Yes, agreed.
Yes, agreed.
Okay. If we can move on then to petition 1613, taking account of sound sensitivity in regulating antisocial behaviour and environmental health. The penultimate petition on our agenda today is from Craig Thompson. We first considered this petition in October when we agreed to seek written submissions from a number of organisations in response to the actions called for in the petition. We have received a number of responses. The responses consider the action called for within the overall framework of housing allocations and building standards. And while the responses recognised that there may be issues for individuals with particular sensitivities, there was not support for the action called for in the petition. I think it would be worth saying that we were very grateful for the scale of the response we received from a whole variety of organisations, including local authorities, and the time they had taken to respond. They clearly recognised that this was an issue of some concern that the petitioner had raised, but obviously also identified concerns about how actually, what would be the implications of implementing the proposals as suggested by the petitioner. But I think it would also be worth reflecting what I think is a very gracious response from the petitioner himself, who says he'd like to thank all who've responded to and discussed my petition. It's my hope that it generates awareness, compassion and help for those who find themselves in a similar situation through no fault of their own. And it's also my hope that it helps towards sowing the seeds of change towards a better, more humanistic and altruistic world. And I thought that was very gracious, given that the respondents were saying, we're not sure if your solution is the right one. But I think he was really saying that even just aware, if he's raised awareness of the subject, yes, then he has performed, yes, an important, yeah, role. So I wonder whether people have suggestions on how we deal with this. I think my own sense is that we really have explored the issue. We recognise that the solution in the petition is not one that's going to be implementable, but that there has been an opportunity afforded for people to be clear about their awareness of the question.
For somebody in this, yeah, in this particular situation, though, we'd feel, you know, a bit of empathy for, yeah, that situation. It's something that's going to be really, I don't know how you could possibly, yeah, implement it. Yeah.
My sense would be that it would be down to the sensitivity of the housing organisation and recognise that this is an issue, and then maybe you're thinking about your allocations policy in terms of the individual, recognising the challenge that presents for them and being sympathetic to that in terms of individual decisions, which you can't really be determined, yeah, at kind of almost like policy level.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think the petitioner's response was very dignified, and you know, we should commend him for that. But I think that we have taken it as far as we can, but we hopefully have raised awareness.
Okay.
Can I just add to that? Sorry. I think the fact is that the statements from the councils clearly indicate they're aware of it and they're doing, yeah, something. I mean, some are doing more than others. My own council, I know for a fact, has this question of maybe even creating a special room, and I've actually worked on a case where that's been done. So they do, I know the officers and the housing allocation do take a lot of things into consideration. So okay, I think there's not much more we can do. It's really in their hands.
Okay. Might I suggest then that that we close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that there is no support for the action called for in the petition, but there is a recognition that there are options open to individuals who may be more sensitive to noise on a case-by-case basis. Is that agreed?
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Okay. And again, just to thank those who responded and to the petitioner himself. If we can move on to petition 1625, wider awareness, acceptance and recognition of pathological demand avoidance syndrome. The final petition for consideration today is petition 1625 on wider awareness, acceptance and recognition of pathological demand avoidance syndrome, PDA, lodged by Patricia Hewitt and Mary Black. Following our previous consideration of this petition, we have received submissions from the Scottish Government, the National Autistic Society Scotland and Inquire, which is managed by Children in Scotland and funded by the Scottish Government. We also have a submission from the petitioners. The petitioners are calling for PDA to be considered as a specific behaviour profile on the autism spectrum. The National Autistic Society's submission says that the profile is becoming increasingly, but not universally accepted, while the Inquire submission noted that calls to its helpline relating to concerns of parents that their children's needs weren't being identified, and there seems to be differences of opinion between professionals involved. The Scottish Government refers to the two major diagnostic classification systems currently in use, ICD-10 and DSM-5. These are regarded as the gold standard for autism diagnosis, and neither of them recognises PDA. Similarly, neither SIGN or NICE guidelines recognise PDA as a distinct category for diagnosis. It appears that the principal reason for this is that a greater evidence base and understanding of the condition has identified that the behaviour within PDA falls within the diagnostic profile of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. It also appears that whatever term might be applied, be that ASD, PDA or something other than that, an individualised approach to support and treatment is a recommended best practice. It might also be worth noting that the ICD-10 is expected to be revised next year, and I wonder if members have any views or suggestions for action to take on this petition.
I thought what I was struck was the inconsistency across councils, from getting a full range of support to the next door council sending the mother for parenting classes. Now, there has to be a better structure than that. I mean, autism is a spectrum. You know, there's no, you can't pin it down. I'd be inclined to see, you know, is there a way that we can formalise this a little bit better in terms of treatment across the country, because, you know, the idea that, you know, you can either your child can gain support, or you can be sent for parenting classes, seems a wildly different approach to an issue.
I think the difficulty we're wrestling with is that I don't know whether it be clinicians or professionals who do the diagnosis are not in agreement. Yeah. There is a question of whether this is actually, you know, a condition on its own within the spectrum, or, and I suppose that the protection is that regardless of whether you recognise the condition or not, all treatments and support should be directed to the individual. So some of that would be about listening to the carers and family members who are looking after somebody with PDA, in their view, that actually don't offer them things that are supports that are actually going to, I mean, that was really the kind of drive of the evidence, wasn't it, that they were getting solutions that would create greater problems for the person they were caring for.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
I don't know how this is possible. I'd really like to hear from professionals on either side of that argument. You know.
Although even with, I suppose my issue would that be with, even if we heard both sides of the argument, no matter the wisdom of Solomon, I don't think we would be able to judge between clinicians. But that is clearly what they're wrestling with, is that there's not a recognition across the board by the experts in the field that this condition that they identify, very strongly identify, is not being acknowledged. But I think maybe we have I think two choices. We can either close the petition, given what the Scottish Government has said, their very clear view, or in line with what Brian has suggested, we write to COSLA and get an overview of whether PD is recognised amongst local authorities, and if they do recognise it, how do they support it? And that might give us a sense again of that.
Yeah, I would go down that route, I think, because I think, as Brian said, there's inconsistencies among local authorities, and it would just help us to understand a bit more about it. So I'd be
okay.
To do that.
Just for clarification, convener, have we already written to COSLA and not received a response? Yeah. Yeah, that's disappointing, because in the previous session we had some difficulty with COSLA not responding quickly or at all, so I hope that we're not going down that route again. Certainly I'd be keen to hear what COSLA's overview is of whether PDA is recognised among local authorities.
Sorry, can I come in a second? I mean, it might be worthwhile talking to the IJBs, the health boards as well, because that obviously ties in the clinician side, but also remember that now it's half ownership by both the NHS, whichever region, and the local authorities. So I think we do need to include a view from them.
I think in terms of COSLA, well, apart from the fact that I don't think technically they have PURDA, but they're obviously going to be moving into local government elections and then the reconstituting of COSLA, so we're talking quite a long-term process. But it may be, in terms of an issue like this, it takes them quite a while to gather the evidence together on an issue that's it's very specific and probably not across the radar of everybody within the local authority. So I think it would be worth contacting. You were suggesting health boards, Morris?
Joint board. Yeah, I think because now so much has been delivered through that, it's taking up the local authorities. It really supersedes what the local authority and social services come under IJBs.
And it may be that actually the reality is that it is a condition because it's not been universally acknowledged, then how would it even have come across the radar of some of these bodies? So if this is partly about raising awareness, then that's certainly something that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we can write to COSLA and just clarify what timescales they're able to, within which they're reasonably able to respond, to recognise the challenges of that. So if that's agreed, that's our final agenda item in public. So can I close the meeting to the public?